The world thrives on comforting illusions. Chief among them is a belief that, in times of crisis, someone will show up to save the day. People cling to the idea of a last-minute rescue, a miracle intervention, or a guardian figure swooping in with answers. But the Sigma male lives by a very different reality. He has internalized a harsh but liberating truth. No one is coming. There is no cavalry charging over the hill, no safety net waiting to catch him. If he's to survive or thrive, it will be because he picked up the shovel himself and started digging his own way out. This isn't some Instagram motivational quote meant to go viral. It's a raw psychological fact that shapes the Sigma's mindset. He doesn't seek validation, support, or sympathy from the outside world. While others may wait for someone to notice their struggle or offer assistance, the Sigma knows that the clock is ticking and the only person truly accountable for his life is himself. In the Sigma's view, there are only two roles you can play in the story of survival. Either you become your own hero, or you end up as a forgotten casualty. Most people are caught in a dreamlike fog, believing that help is always just a phone call away, that loyalty from others is guaranteed, or that empathy will flow freely when needed most. But the Sigma has already faced a harsh awakening. He's seen what bystander apathy looks like, how the more people witness your pain, the more likely they are to do nothing about it. Layer on the cold realities of adult life, betrayals, performative friendships, unspoken exits, and you begin to understand why the Sigma doesn't count on anyone but himself. Where others may freeze, post vague messages online, or quietly wait for some cosmic sign, the Sigma makes a decisive move. He doesn't whine. He doesn't wait for someone to fix his life. He doesn't fantasize about fate stepping in. He simply acts, not because he's heartless, but because he's awake, painfully and powerfully awake. He knows that in this world, if you aren't your own rescue mission, you become someone else's cautionary tale. And make no mistake, this outlook isn't born from bitterness. It's born from clarity. It's not about lacking emotion. It's about seeing the world for what it is, not what we wish it to be. If that sounds harsh, it's because truth often is. If you're still hoping that someone, somewhere will swoop in and fix your broken plans or failed dreams, the Sigma's mindset might feel brutal. But if you've ever had that chilling moment when you realize no one is coming, when silence echoed louder than support, you've brushed against the Sigma way of thinking. Because Sigmas have already buried the fantasy of being rescued. That version of themselves, the one that waited, hoped, or begged, is long gone. What remains is someone who doesn't just survive. They endure, adapt, and lead themselves through the storm. And that's where their true power begins. 1. People will watch you sink, then ask why you didn't swim. One of the harshest and most revealing truths a Sigma male learns through experience is this. People will often watch you sink and then, with the most audacious tone of concern, ask why you didn't swim. It's not just abandonment. It's a kind of passive cruelty disguised as detachment. When your world begins to unravel, when the foundation beneath your feet gives way, don't expect people to leap to your aid. Most won't throw a rope, won't offer a genuine hand. Instead, they'll stand at a distance, absorbed in their routines and distractions, offering vague words like, "Let me know if you need anything," only to vanish the moment you're truly in need. But once the storm has passed, once you've dragged yourself out of the wreckage with no help but your own, they'll return with questions. Not questions rooted in empathy, but inquiries meant to deflect their own guilt and shame. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you reach out? Why did you isolate yourself? These aren't asked to understand your suffering. They're asked so they can sleep better at night, convincing themselves that you're the one who failed, not them. Sigmas recognize this pattern early. They've sat in crowded rooms, surrounded by people who claim to care, and still felt like shadows, heard but not truly seen, noticed but never acknowledged. When real adversity struck, the text stopped, the calls faded. People once loud in celebration became mute in your struggle. Everyone, suddenly, had their reasons, their distance, their silence. That's when a Sigma learns a life-altering lesson. People don't mind watching you drown, so long as it doesn't inconvenience them. In response to this brutal reality, Sigmas undergo a quiet transformation. They stop expecting a rescue. They stop explaining their pain. They stop giving others a chance to fail them again. Instead, They build a different kind of strength, one born not in comfort, but in solitude. They learn to tread water during storms no one else even notices. They become their own lifeline, their own compass. And when they finally claw their way out of the chaos, they don't look for applause. They don't seek validation. They carry their survival in silence, becoming unshakably resilient. What makes it even more disturbing is how others behave after you survived. Once you've endured the darkness alone and managed to stand again, people reappear. Suddenly, they're full of advice, curiosity, or shallow concern. They treat your suffering like it was a teaching moment. So, what did you learn from it all? They ask, as if your pain was just content for some self-improvement seminar. But the Sigma doesn't forget. He remembers who stood by and who walked away. And with that memory, he constructs unbreakable boundaries, ones that those people will never cross again. This is what separates the Sigma from the masses. While most wait around, hoping for a miracle or someone pulled from the fire, the Sigma male is already strategizing his escape. He doesn't need witnesses. He doesn't crave sympathy. He needs only one thing: space to become stronger. Because the next time the world tries to drown him, he won't be looking around for help. He'll be sharpening his resolve, preparing to rise again. And when he does rise, as he always does, it won't be the fanfare or celebration. It will be in silence, with no handouts, no saviors, and no one to thank but himself. They expect abandonment, so they prepare for autonomy. For the Sigma male, expecting abandonment is not about pessimism. It's about pattern recognition. Over time, they've seen the same script play out too many times to believe in permanence. Someone enters their life with warmth, attention, and promises. They say things like, "I've got your back," and for a brief moment, it seems genuine. But the Sigma doesn't get too comfortable. He's learned that attention often fades into distance, and promises tend to dissolve into silence the moment life becomes inconvenient. Rather than clinging to hope that this time will be different, the Sigma quietly prepares for the inevitable. He doesn't scramble when things fall apart, because he already saw it coming. In fact, he doesn't rely on others at all when it truly counts. He is the backup plan. Emotionally, mentally, and even financially, the Sigma builds himself in a way that insulates him from collapse. He understands that even those with the best of intentions can leave when life shifts, and some people will love you deeply until it costs them something. Sigmas don't take this personally. They've simply seen enough to stop building their foundations on other people. They don't make anyone the center of their security or happiness. Instead, they invest in internal systems, resilience, discipline, independence. When others drift or disappear, they don't beg them to stay. If someone's walking away, the Sigma won't just let them go. He'll open the door wider. He's not in the business of convincing anyone to remain in his life. This doesn't mean the Sigma is cold or disconnected. It means he's clear. He doesn't chase, cling, or plead. His peace isn't built on people. It's built on preparation. And because of that, he's not shattered when support vanishes. Where others might spiral into panic, overanalyze what went wrong, or beg for closure, the Sigma remains still. The silence that unnerves others only confirms what he already knew. He's always been on his own. The difference now is that he's strong enough not just to endure it, but to thrive in it. You won't catch the Sigma venting on social media or ranting about who hurt him. He won't be found throwing public shade or acting out for attention. When someone betrays him or walks away, he closes a chapter, cleanly, coldly, and permanently. Because for the Sigma, autonomy isn't just a lifestyle. It's his armor. It's the calm certainty that no matter who walks away, he'll still be standing. In fact, he'll be standing taller, more focused, more grounded, and far more formidable than before. 3. They've accepted that being the lone wolf isn't romantic. It's reality. There's nothing glamorous about being the lone wolf, despite what movies and memes suggest. Solitude, for the Sigma male, isn't some cinematic montage scored with moody music and inspirational quotes. It's raw, it's real, and more often than not, it's the only safe choice. Sigmas didn't choose isolation because it looks cool or mysterious. They chose it because the alternative was worse: betrayal, disappointment, and dead weight. They walked through enough situations where people said all the right things, offering loyalty, companionship, and support, only to disappear when things got difficult. The truth is, many of those who claim to be teammates were never built for the weight of the mission. They folded under pressure, stepped back in moments that mattered, or simply weren't equipped to handle the depth of the Sigma's journey. So no, the Sigma doesn't romanticize solitude. He recognizes it for what it is, a necessary, strategic choice for survival and clarity. The world loves the idea of the mysterious outsider, the quiet rebel, the misunderstood genius, the man who walks alone because he's above the noise. But the Sigma knows the reality behind that myth. It's not just quiet walks and thoughtful brooding. It's long, lonely nights. It's making hard choices with no one to turn to. It's the unseen battles of mental endurance that no one will ever applaud. It's being your own motivator, your own therapist, your own emergency contact. It's learning to create your own light in the darkness, because no one else is coming to bring it. And even when help does appear, the Sigma doesn't rush to embrace it. He questions motives not out of paranoia, but out of experience. He's had to be self-sufficient for so long that he knows how dangerous it is to place your fate in someone else's hands. He doesn't post online about cutting people off or announce his independence. He just lives it, quietly, cleanly, unshaken. While others might talk about boundaries, Sigmas enforce them through action. While many need crowds to feel important, the Sigma finds power in being unseen, unnoticed, until his results speak louder than any introduction ever could. By the time people notice his success or presence, he's already too far ahead to explain how he got there. He's learned, through painful clarity, that being surrounded doesn't mean being supported. Having a large circle doesn't mean you have a tribe. So he made the conscious decision to walk alone, not out of arrogance, but out of wisdom. Not because he hates people, but because he knows what happens when you depend on the wrong ones. For the Sigma, solitude isn't a mood, it's the foundation of his life. Not because he thinks he's above connection, but because he knows who he becomes when he stops expecting anyone else to carry the weight. And in that quiet, relentless solitude, he becomes unstoppable. For they've outgrown the fantasy that help comes without a price. For most people, help appears to be a gesture of goodwill, offered with a smile, a kind word, or a gentle reassurance like, "Let me know if you ever need anything." But the Sigma has learned that such gestures often come wrapped in invisible strings. They've seen how favors are rarely free, how generosity is frequently transactional. What begins as kindness slowly mutates into leverage. That one favor morphs into subtle guilt trips. That small act of support soon becomes a recurring expectation. And worst of all, the so-called help becomes a quiet form of control, a tool to bind, to manipulate, to stake a claim over the Sigma's independence. This is a pattern Sigmas have studied closely. It didn't take many experiences to decode it. Once they recognized the formula, favor now, emotional invoice later, they opted out entirely. To the Sigma, the moment someone utters a phrase, "After all I've done for you," is the moment the mask slips. It reveals the truth behind the gesture. That help wasn't selfless. It was bait. And Sigmas are done getting hooked. They've come to see that rescue, in many cases, is not about compassion. It's about creating a subtle power dynamic. It's about establishing emotional debt, a kind of unspoken servitude where the help are no longer free agents, but people bound to repay kindness with compliance. And the Sigma? He would rather walk barefoot, through fire, than be someone's project or pawn. He would rather bleed quietly in solitude than accept a lifeline that becomes a leash. This isn't pride, it's self-defense. Sigmas are not allergic to receiving help. They are allergic to being owned. They don't want their decisions shaped by obligations. They don't want to make choices based on keeping someone happy, just because they once offered assistance. They would rather build from scratch than let someone else plant their flag on the Sigma's journey. So, they do the hard thing. They build their own safety nets. They clean up their own messes. They finance their own dreams. Even when the load is heavy, even when it breaks them, they carry it, because the price of self-sufficiency is steep, but the cost of dependence is their soul. That's why when someone offers to save them, the Sigma doesn't rush in. They don't see it as a blessing. They see it as a potential trap. They gnaw it politely. smile even, but in their mind, they've already declined because they've learned the harsh but freeing truth. Most help has interest rates, and those rates are paid not in money, but in autonomy. So they walk alone, not because they don't trust humanity, but because they no longer believe in the illusion of help without a hook. 5. They've seen the hero complex up close, and it's ugly. There's a certain type of person who offers help not out of love, but out of ego. Sigmas have seen this up close and personal. These aren't villains in the traditional sense. They're the self-proclaimed heroes, the ones who swoop in unsolicited to fix others, all while carefully constructing a narrative in which they become the savior. At first, their generosity looks noble. Their words are kind, their actions swift. But over time, the real motive emerges. They don't want to help, they want credit. They want control. These are the types who can't help but remind you of their sacrifices. If it wasn't for me, they'll say, or, you'd still be struggling if I hadn't stepped in. The Sigma has endured this brand of manipulation enough to develop an instinctive repulsion toward it. They received help that was really a performance, filled with backhanded compliments, thinly veiled insults, and favors that came with a side dish of ownership. What the Sigma understands is that these people don't want to see you rise. They want to be the reason you rose. They don't want to walk beside you. They want to stand above you and claim the view. That's why the Sigma refuses the invitation. They'd rather suffer in silence than become the star of someone else's hero story. Because once you let these people in, they start editing the narrative. Suddenly, your victory isn't yours. It's theirs. Your comeback belongs to their generosity, and your independence is held hostage by their self-congratulatory storytelling. The Sigma doesn't want the stage if someone else is writing the script. They don't want applause if it comes at the cost of their dignity. They've seen how fake heroes twist their support into a weapon, turning your gratitude into a muzzle and your success into their trophy. The world eats up these savior stories, offering praise to the fixer, while the person they save gets turned into a footnote. So the Sigma exits that game entirely. No speeches, no rescues, no performances. When things fall apart, they don't look around for a helping hand. They dig in. They rebuild from the wreckage with their own 2 hands. They bandage their wounds. They endure the storm, not because they want to be stoic, but because they don't want to be someone's prized pet. Sigmas understand that some people offer help only to later remind you of your weakness. So they stop asking. They let the pain refine them in silence. They claw their way up from rock bottom alone, even if it leaves their hands bloody. Because the one thing worse than suffering is surviving under someone else's shadow. They've seen behind the curtain. They know the so-called hero complex is often driven by ego, entitlement, and the hunger to feel superior. And that's why they trust solitude more than self-proclaimed saviors. Because solitude might be lonely, but at least it doesn't demand a spotlight or send invoices when healing is done. For the Sigma, the path alone may be harder, but it is theirs, and that makes it worth every silent, grueling step. 6. They don't expect empathy. They study it like a predator studies prey. Sigmas walk through the world with a quiet edge, not because they're cold or cruel, but because they've long abandoned the fantasy that empathy is freely given. They've learned the hard way that most displays of concern are little more than performance. They've sat in rooms full of people who nod solemnly, murmur generic comforts like, "That must be hard," and sigh with practiced sympathy, all without ever truly feeling anything. It's a performance, a theater of morality where the actor leaves the stage feeling like a good person, while the one actually struggling is left alone, still bleeding, still drowning, still unheard. And so, somewhere along the way, Sigma stopped looking for empathy and started studying it. They began dissecting human emotion the way a biologist studies cells, or a predator studies its environment. They watched not to connect, but to decode. They listened to more than just words. They analyze the tone beneath them. They look for the micro-expressions that betray real emotion. They observe the timing of pauses, the twitch of the mouth, the flicker of the eyes. To most people, these are invisible, but to the Sigma, they are data points, patterns, evidence. Is the person in front of them truly concerned, or simply hungry for gossip? Is the comforting touch genuine, or a disguised probe for weakness? This is why Sigmas seem emotionally distant to others, why they appear detached, guarded, even cold. But this distance isn't rooted in cruelty, it's strategy. The world has taught them that emotional vulnerability is currency, and once spent, it's rarely returned. Many people don't want to understand you. They want to own your pain, to feel morally superior, or to wield your vulnerability as leverage in future interactions. And so, Sigma stopped offering their emotions freely. They understand the power of emotion, but they don't weaponize their own, nor do they allow others to manipulate them with feigned compassion. When others cry or unravel, most people rush to comfort, to fix, to perform. But the Sigma remains still, watching out the tears, but the room. Who's watching? Who's reacting? Who's offering comfort? And who's pretending? This isn't sociopathy. It's self-preservation. It's the kind of emotional discipline that comes only after being burned by people who mistook your openness for a weakness. Sigmas have realized that in a world where emotions are traded like commodities, protecting your emotional energy is the ultimate act of strength. And yet, they're not heartless. When true empathy does appear, real, quiet, non-performative empathy, they notice, not because they're desperate for it, but because they've trained themselves to identify authenticity. Even then, they don't immediately lean in. Trust to a Sigma is never given in response to one act. It's earned slowly through consistent patterns, moments of silence, and the absence of self-interest. Until that trust is earned, Sigmas remain in observer mode. They don't beg to be understood, don't plead for emotional reassurance. Instead, they track behaviors, map personalities, and move accordingly. They have no interest in playing the victim. They don't fish for comfort. They'd rather know where they stand than chase a feeling that might be fake. To some, this looks like emotional detachment. But for the Sigma, it's precision. It's emotional calculus. It's the result of realizing that survival, true internal survival, requires more than just resilience. It requires discernment. In a world drowning in fake smiles, scripted concern, empathy laced with ego, Sigmas choose to feel nothing until they're absolutely sure. Because when your piece is self-made and your emotional radar is that sharp, you're not cold, you're calculated. And that precision is how Sigmas stay unshaken, unreadable, and completely in control, even in a world full of emotional actors. 7. They've seen that pity is just superiority in disguise. Sigma males carry themselves with quiet defiance, not because they want attention, but because they've tasted the bitter flavor of pity, and they've sworn never to sip from that cup again. To them, pity is not compassion. It's condescension wearing a gentle smile. It's a silent whisper that says, "You poor thing, I'm so glad I'm not you." And if there's one thing a Sigma will never accept, it's being looked down on. They've learned a harsh but valuable truth. No one ever truly pities someone they respect. Pity, by its nature, places one person above another, turning the receiver into a project, an object of sadness rather than a force of strength. Sigmas would rather be painted as a cold villain in someone's narrative than be cast as the tragic soul who needs saving. Because when someone pities you, they don't see your power, they see your pain as entertainment or ego fuel. So Sigmas don't chase pity. They don't air out their wounds on social media. They don't package their heartbreak into digestible anecdotes. They don't curate vulnerability to win sympathy. Instead, they wear silence like armor. They found far more power in being misunderstood, feared, or underestimated than in being pitted. Misunderstanding creates distance, but pity creates a cage, a soft, suffocating one line with false empathy. They've watched how pity changes a room, voices soften, energy shifts, eyes fill with forced concern. Suddenly, people speak to you like you're glass, like a shelf too fragile to touch. And to a Sigma, that's worse than being ignored. Because being ignored means invisibility, but being pitted means being diminished, turned into someone's emotional charity case. So they hide their struggles not out of pride, but out of self-protection. Because once someone pities you, you're no longer dangerous. You're no longer complex. You're reduced to a label, the one who went through a lot. And from that point on, no one sees your strength. They only see your scars. What makes it more infuriating is how subtle it all is. Most people don't even realize they're doing it. They confuse pity with empathy, but Sigmas know better. Empathy sits beside you in silence. Pity stands above you with a script. One humanizes, the other diminishes. That's why Sigmas choose distance over disclosure. They'd rather be the enigma others fear than the sob story others exploit. They're not looking to be anyone's inspiration, therapy project, or motivational tale. They don't want your applause if it comes with a head tilt and a sad smile. They want space. Space to fall. Space to rise. Space to be powerful again, without ever being pitted for where they once stood broken. 8. They know that success attracts leeches, not lifeguards. Sigma males have also seen another brutal side of reality, one that becomes clearer the moment they start to rise. When they were struggling, the world turned its back. Their inboxes stayed quiet, calls went unanswered, and their pain echoed without reply. No lifeguard showed up, no ropes were thrown. They drowned alone. But the second they started winning, once the pain was hidden behind progress and the scars had become strength, suddenly, the crowd reappeared, clapping loudly and claiming they always believed. But Sigmas don't hear applause. They hear calculation. They've come to recognize the difference between genuine support and opportunism masked as encouragement. When they were buried in the grind, no one checked in. But once the climb began and the view became clearer, hands started appearing, not to pull them higher, but to latch on and ride the wave. People don't want to help build the fire. They just want to bask in the heat. Sigmas have lived this enough times to know exactly how it works. When you're losing, you're invisible. When you're winning, you're valuable. That's why they don't celebrate loudly. They don't post their wins. They don't beg to be seen, because they know what that visibility attracts. The clingers, the fair weather friends, the sudden reconnections that are more about proximity to success than genuine affection. Even compliments come laced with expectation. A simple, "I'm proud of you," can carry the unspoken message of, "Now, what can I get from you?" Sigmas study these intentions. They don't fall for flattering words or empty validation. They look for the consistency that comes not in the celebrations, but in the trenches, when things were uncertain, messy, or quiet. That's where real loyalty lives. So when the crowd comes rushing in after the fact, Sigmas don't feel proud. They feel warned, because they've learned. When you're finally rising, people don't come to lift you higher. They come to harvest. Not your soul, but your success. Not your story, but your spotlight. And that's why Sigmas build walls, not to isolate themselves, but to filter out the opportunists from the real ones. They don't give access just because someone smiles. If you weren't there when they bled, don't expect a place at the table now that they've healed. To Sigmas, success doesn't attract saviors. It attracts leeches. And they treat both accordingly, with distance, clarity, and zero tolerance for those who only show up when it's easy to applaud. 9. They know suffering is personal and responsibility is non-transferable. The Sigma male has no illusions about suffering. They know it intimately, not as a badge of honor, not as a storyline for sympathy, but as a private, relentless training ground. They've come to accept something most people resist. No one owes them understanding. No one's obligated to care. And no one is coming to carry their weight for them when the load gets too heavy. This isn't bitterness. It's brutal clarity. Sigmas don't crumble under that truth. They sharpen themselves against it. Because once you stop waiting to be rescued, you start building the kind of self that can't be broken. They watch how most people react to pain, offering nods, half-hearted comforts, and then disappearing back into their own lives. And honestly, Sigmas don't hold it against them. Everyone's carrying their own burdens, but they've chosen to respond differently. Instead of hoping for understanding, they prepare for solitude. They don't view hardship as a ticket to sympathy or an excuse to collapse. To them, every setback is a personal battlefield, and no one else can fight it for them. They've accepted that suffering is theirs to carry, not parade. And because they don't outsource their pain, they also don't outsource their responsibility. When things fall apart, they don't point fingers. They don't explain, blame, or spiral into victimhood. They recalibrate. They own the failure. They learn from it and adjust. Quietly, methodically. You won't find them broadcasting their wounds or using their story to seek applause. Instead, they dress their scars in silence, fix their posture, and keep moving forward. Because they understand, Pain doesn't make you special. Endurance does. And the way you carry pain determines the power it gives, or takes. This is why Sigmas are often misunderstood as cold or detached. But they're not void of emotion. They just realize that relying on external validation for internal storms is a losing game. Instead, they've trained for those storms. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they've armored up. They don't expect the world to pause for them. They don't wait for fairness. They don't need cheerleaders. They need resilience. And they've built it. Because in a world that's quick to leave you when the skies turn dark, the Sigma has learned to become his own shelter. And in that solitude, in that ownership of every win and every wound, they find something most never touch: unshakable self-reliance. The kind that can't be borrowed, bought, or broken. The kind that endures, even when no one's clapping. 10. They're the only backup plan they trust. Sigma males operate under a philosophy that most people find extreme, until everything falls apart, while others panic, scramble for solutions, or reach for their phones in desperation. Sigmas are already in motion, enacting plans they've rehearsed in silence. They don't wait for rescue. They are the rescue. When crisis strikes and confusion reigns, the Sigma doesn't ask, "Who's coming to help?" He already knows the answer. No one. But this isn't arrogance or some cinematic lone wolf bravado. It's a result of 1,000 lessons carved from disappointment. Sigmas have watched people make promises and vanish the moment pressure mounted. They've seen support systems collapse like houses of cards. They've witnessed leaders freeze, teammates flake, and friends fade into background when things got ugly. And rather than grow bitter, they adapted. They stopped outsourcing safety and security and turned inward. It's not that Sigmas don't feel fear. They do, but they've trained themselves not to obey it. In fact, their stillness in moments of chaos isn't apathy or indifference. It's calculation. What you mistake for calm is actually their brain, silently scanning options, cross-referencing outcomes, and flipping through contingency plans they've already run 100 times over in their mental war room. Most people only begin thinking when the world falls apart. Sigmas have already lived the collapse in their minds, again and again, so when the moment arrives, they don't react. They execute. This relentless mental preparedness comes from pattern recognition, not pride. Sigmas have kept receipts on every broken promise, every late response, every time they were left hanging when it mattered most. They didn't complain. They didn't throw tantrums. They paid attention. And with each letdown, they became more efficient, more self-reliant, more bulletproof. They learned not to build their survival on someone else's reassurance. Because words are beautiful, but in a storm, you can't cling to poetry. That's why Sigmas don't announce it when they handle disaster. They don't perform resilience. To them, surviving setbacks isn't something worth bragging about. It's just another Tuesday. While the rest of the world is searching for exits, they're silently building one with whatever scraps are left. They don't need pristine conditions. They just need time and space to think. And no, it's not that they dislike support, but they know better than to depend on it. Because the phrase, "I've got your back," often evaporates when the pressure hits. The Sigma's mindset is simple. If your safety depends on someone else, it's not safety, it's gambling. So when you see a Sigma male silent in the middle of chaos, don't confuse that silence with confusion or passivity. That's the sound of someone activating not just Plan B, but Plan C, Plan D, and Plan E. A Sigma's trust fund isn't made of favors or friendships. It's made of foresight, preparation, and an unshakable sense of internal leadership. Conclusion: the Sigma's unshakable truth. The Sigma male walks a path that few are willing or even able to follow. It's not paved with encouragement or applause. It's forged in fire, betrayal, silence, and solitude. It's a journey marked by inner storms and outer isolation. But for those who walk it, the payoff is profound. It's not wealth or fame or praise. It's something rarer, unbreakable self-trust. It's the calm that comes from knowing that no matter what the world throws at you, you have you, and that's enough. There's no cavalry coming, no team rushing to your side, no script where someone swoops in at the last moment. And for the Sigma, that's not a sad truth. It's a liberating one. Because when you stop waiting for someone to save you, You start becoming the one who can't be broken. Grab a shovel isn't just tough talk. It's the unwritten gospel of the Sigma. It means don't wait, don't hope, don't freeze. Start digging, building, climbing, whatever it takes. Because the Sigma male doesn't hope for a hero. He becomes one, for himself, every single time. And once you've lived like that, truly tasted what it means to rely on no one but yourself, you never go back. You never again depend on someone to carry your weight or catch your fall. You walk taller, plan deeper, and think sharper. Not out of pride, out of necessity. Because when everything burns down, the Sigma doesn't look around for help. He steps forward to the smoke, quiet, calculating, and already rebuilding. Do you resonate with the ideas I shared in this video? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in more content about Sigma males, explore the other videos on this channel. Thanks for watching.